Since September 19th, officers from our Fraud Detection and National Security Directorate, working in teams, have conducted over 1,000 site visits across the Minneapolis-St Paul area as part of this operation. What they found should shock all of America. Focusing on a list of over 1,000 target cases involving more than 900 individuals, our officers encountered blatant marriage fraud, visa overstays, people claiming to work at businesses that can't be found, forged documents, abuse of the H-1B visa system, abuse of the F-1 visas, and many other discrepancies.
Federal officials announced a major immigration fraud crackdown in Minneapolis-St Paul this week. The 9-day effort, dubbed Operation Twin Shield, was the first of its kind in the region. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services led the operation with support from ICE and the FBI, focusing on fraud detection and deterrence. Investigators reviewed over 1,000 pending immigration benefit cases flagged for fraud or ineligibility. More than 900 site visits and in-person interviews were conducted during the surge operation. Officers uncovered suspected fraud in 275 cases, nearly 44% of those investigated. It included sham marriages and forged documents designed to bypass immigration law, as per Director of USCIS Joseph Edlow. In one case, a person exploited an elderly U.S. citizen in a fraudulent marriage scheme. Another case involved falsifying a death certificate while the spouse was alive and living nearby. So far, 42 cases were referred to ICE and 4 individuals taken into custody, officials said. No criminal charges have been filed yet, but more referrals and investigations are expected. Operation Twin Shield is the first time USCIS dedicated resources on this scale in a single geographical area. Director Joseph Edlow said that the operation shows the government's duty to keep the system legitimate. Officials stressed this was only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to immigration fraud. The announcement came a day after the Department of Justice sued Minneapolis and St. Paul over sanctuary city policies.
Since September 19th, officers from our Fraud Detection and National Security Directorate, working in teams, have conducted over 1,000 site visits across the Minneapolis-St Paul area as part of this operation. What they found should shock all of America. Focusing on a list of over 1,000 target cases involving more than 900 individuals, our officers encountered blatant marriage fraud, visa overstays, people claiming to work at businesses that can't be found, forged documents, abuse of the H-1B visa system, abuse of the F-1 visas, and many other discrepancies. Over the course of the operation, our officers found indication of fraud, non-compliance, or public safety and national security concerns in nearly a little less than 50% of the cases interviewed. We found troubling patterns with the Uniting for Ukraine program that should have raised serious concerns under other administrations, such as an individual filing to sponsor more than 100 aliens, and organizations sponsoring hundreds. We are continuing to investigate these cases. Some of the other troubling cases that our officers found. In one case, officers identified an alien who had overstayed his visa waiver, who was the son of a known or suspected terrorist on the no-fly list. He had previously been found to have engaged in marriage fraud, which resulted in the denial of several immigration benefit requests. He was arrested and is now presently being returned to his country of origin. In another, an individual admitted to obtaining a fake death certificate in Kenya for just $100 to prove he was no longer married. In reality, his wife is alive, living here in Minneapolis, and is the mother of 5 of his children. And incidentally, he has another wife living in Sweden with whom he has an additional 3 children. In another case, an alien entered the United States without inspection in 2023, was released by Border Patrol. The alien married a U.S. citizen while in removal proceedings and was interviewed at the Minneapolis-St Paul USCIS field office just last week, where both he and his American spouse stated under oath that their marriage was legitimate. The USCIS officers conducting the interview were suspicious. The site visits were authorized the same day. The American spouse ultimately that afternoon admitted the marriage was fraudulent and entered into solely for immigration purposes and withdrew her petition for that alien. This type of same-day action for from interview to site visit has really never happened before. And I am incredibly impressed and thankful to the diligent work of the agents who made that happen for the first time, but not for the last time. And finally, I wanted to note, in one case, an alien engaged in marriage fraud by taking advantage of an elderly U.S. citizen spouse, including threats and severe neglect. The American spouse was able to divorce the alien with the help of her family and caregivers, but the family still lives in fear of retaliation from the alien over the failed marriage fraud scam. These are not victimless crimes. Every case of fraud we uncover damages our national security, undermines the integrity of our immigration system, and as I just gave you an example, has real consequences. I want the American people to know that we are declaring war on immigration fraud. We will continue to pursue those who seek to abuse our immigration system using every tool at our disposal. This operation, Twin Shield, is just the first phase of what we are looking at. The critical information gathered, the fraud patterns uncovered, will help us to combat fraud at the next level. We now begin the process of analyzing, cross-checking, reviewing cases using these results. These investigations will help us determine the next steps in many cases. We will be looking at grants of immigration benefits already given. We will be looking at other patterns, and we will be re-examining benefits to determine whether rescission, revocation is appropriate in any of these cases. Additionally, I would say right now that if you seek to commit immigration fraud in this country, you will find yourself meeting with our officers at USCIS. You will meet officers within our federal partners at ICE, CBP, FBI, DEA, whoever is working with us. And you will find yourself not only without benefits, but you will find yourself prosecuted. We will continue to tirelessly work with the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Minnesota, as well as in every other jurisdiction, to make sure that these cases are treated as they should be, and that aliens, attorneys, preparers, others who engage in immigration fraud are properly punished. I also want to touch briefly on the reception our officers received in the field. They were harassed, threatened, accused of being scammers, and even had the police called on them. At least one residence was so unsafe that they had to call off the site visit altogether. This is simply unacceptable, and I want to remind the public that our officers are doing a job to protect all Americans. They deserve the respect and cooperation as they go along with those duties. Under President Trump's leadership, we have empowered our immigration officers to thoroughly vet aliens as required by law, and to pursue immigration fraud wherever and whenever we encounter it. Secretary Noem has also recently delegated certain law enforcement authorities to me at USCIS that will allow this agency to establish a cadre of criminal investigators to increase the department's ability to fully investigate and ensure prosecutions of the very types of immigration fraud that this operation uncovered. As we work to undo the neglect of the Biden administration, we will continue to launch operations like this across the country. Operation Twin Shield was a major enforcement operation, and we will be bringing many more efforts like this to cities across the country. The results you see today speak for themselves, and they will serve to deter those who would attempt to undermine our country and its laws, whether for money, to gain legal status, or to harm the American people. At the end of the day, immigration fraud will not and will no longer be tolerated in this country.